Took down mammoths, now gets by on plundered sheep. And now men have come to put a final stop to her scavenging. The Lord and his squire arrive, ready to face whatever lurks within. A creature that they believe is born of hell's fire. An evil that must be destroyed. They do not see a frightened animal, unable to defend itself. Like elephants, dragon mothers appear to mourn their dead. But the grieving will have to wait. In a final insult, the assassins wear the blood of her daughter as a trophy. They are about to feel the full vented fury of a vengeful dragon mother. The Lord will escape. His squire won't be so fortunate. With the loss of her daughter, the female mountain dragon has been brought into season again. Even after such a calamity, instinct compels her to look for a mate once more. So she tries to draw the male back into her territory. She hoards the armor from her daughter's assassin to embellish her display. Dragons are naturally attracted to reflective objects, likely because they're conditioned to look for shiny platinum deposits. But her calls and her scent marking will go unanswered. No amount of armor will help her summon the male back now. Chances are, he's no longer alive. Where would he have gone to escape human pressures? There's nowhere left to hide. As winter draws in and food is at its scarcest, the dragon begins shutting down. Like crocodiles in periods of drought, she is quite capable of getting through lean times. She'll survive the winter on her meager reserves of fat. Her body temperature drops dramatically, and she goes into suspended animation. But this survival strategy leaves her exposed. All her usual functions are placed on emergency status, and her hydrogen reserves fall to almost zero. The female is awakened from her torpor. Many humans have troubled her since her daughter's death, and now humans have come to trouble her once more. This time they are better prepared. Mercenaries paid for by the local lord. Dragon slayers. Without food, she can't make hydrogen. And without her precious gas, she cannot fly or breathe fire. She's trapped. Final clash between man and beast, in which none shall triumph. Over the years, the cave was sealed by snow and ice, the bloody battle frozen in time. The dragon faded from reality to mythology. Perhaps it would have stayed that way if the glacier hadn't given up its secrets at last. Echo scans reveal another chamber adjacent, hidden behind a wall of ice. Scientists deploy a camera-mounted ROV to investigate. Inside, their suspicions are confirmed. They find more human remains, and they find the body of the adult dragon that lived in this cave and died here with her daughter. The last of a legendary line. A legend made flesh and blood. A creature that has fired our imagination for thousands of years. A creature that burns bright in the memory of all humankind. But if dragons were at last delivered from the realm of myth, then what would we find? What stories would they have to tell us? It is human nature to exaggerate what we fear, and so it is likely that we would have overlooked much about what dragons once were. They were soaring creatures that spouted fire. They sacrificed themselves so that they might save their young. They were, above all, creatures that did what they must in order to survive. How easy it would have been for us to forget that part of the story. How easy it would have been to forget that they must have been so much more than mere monsters.
The story of dragons, in most of our minds, begins with myth and legend, the stories that we heard as children. How come everybody had pictures, images, stories of dragons?
Every culture has a dragon myth. The Eskimos, the Aztecs, the Chinese.
Yet these were countries that never connected, that never talked to each other. It simply is too hard to believe that they were all coincidentally making it up.
Dragons are a universal cultural phenomenon.
How did that come about? Where did that come from?
How do all these cultures arrive at the same idea of the same basic animal?
How come dragons are so much on everybody's mind around the world?
A beast you thought could never have existed actually existed.
Making a fantasy real behind the scenes of Animal Planet's Dragons. 3 years in the making, Dragons is the newest special from Animal Planet. Animal Planet worked with production crews from around the world and collaborated with top scientists, artists, and animators to create this genre-busting special. Thanks to their groundbreaking work, you will believe the dragons were real and might still be. Explore the history of the dragon, delve into the real science of the sinister serpent, and go behind the scenes to see how the biggest special in Animal Planet history was created. Discover how a fantasy was made real. Discover Animal Planet's Dragons.
Charlie Foley had the idea that dragons actually existed. I thought one day it'd be great if I could work on a documentary about dragons. Well, Charlie's idea, imagining that dragons are real animals, it was much bigger than I'd ever imagined. And then he pulled me into the project here, and it's something I've been wanting to work on for years.
Dragons are always a part of a story. They're never the story themselves. And that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to make the dragons the centerpiece. This is their story. This isn't a story in which they figure. This is all about dragons.
Together, in my office, we kind of came up with a story. Charlie said, what if we found a dragon body? I said, yeah, what if it was in a cave up in the ice, just like it just revealed? And what if there were bodies in there? And part of the story is trying to figure out what happened in that cave. So Charlie and I just kind of built on each other's ideas. It was really exciting.
We didn't want to just make this sort of a reconstruction of existing myths. We wanted to make our own stories, and really we had to, because if we're going to treat dragons like real animals, that hasn't been done before, and that's what the exciting challenge was that was in front of us.
But before the story of dragons could begin, there were many questions that needed to be answered.
We wanted to know how they could fly, how they could reproduce.
What would they have looked like? How would they have breathed fire?
Are they warm-blooded? Are they cold-blooded?
What their physiologies, their biologies, their behaviors have been like?
How big would its wings have been? What proportions would its body have had to have for it to be able to fly?
How did they avoid exploding themselves when they breathed out fire?
We set out to make dragons as convincing as possible. We worked with our academic sources, we worked with natural history experts to be as credible as you could be about what dragons were really like.
Kevin and I started thinking, if dragons really were real, how would they have lived? Where would they have lived? And we presented that to Dr. Hogarth, and he helped refine some of the things that we had. And through a process of slow evolution of thought, we started making dragons that were more and more realistic.
We knew what species of dragons we wanted to do, but we wanted him to put the flesh on the bones of these dragons and to make sure that when we came with a theory of how it could breathe fire, how it could fly, that it made sense.
It's amazing how much was known about dragons, how they grew, what they fed on, how they behaved, all the little characteristics, all the different kinds of dragons, and it's all documented in medieval manuscripts, in Chinese encyclopedias, going right back to the dawn of history, the earliest dragons, about 3,000 or 4,000 years old.
We see dragons throughout history, from the Cretaceous period alongside Tyrannosaurus rex, all the way into the Middle Ages.
People believed in dragons as real animals, just like any other animal. And actually, if you think about it, how could you say in Western Europe in the Middle Ages that an elephant was a real animal and a dragon wasn't? The information you had about them was both the same in each case. What we're trying to do is to produce an animal that might have evolved and just happened not to. It had to be a plausible size and shape, plausible physiology, reasonable colours. One of the interesting technical questions, of course, was how to get them airborne. And partly that's a matter of wings and so on, but in order to make them light, we had them generating hydrogen. There are bacteria which can produce hydrogen, and a lot of animals have bacteria in their guts. So we put 2 and 2 together and said that these dragons had gut bacteria which produced hydrogen, and we had a special hydrogen storage chamber. So by using biological mechanisms, we managed to put together a mechanism for facilitating flight in dragons by making them lighter, using hydrogen for buoyancy, and also using the hydrogen and oxygen and the latest thing in catalytic technology to produce the fire breathing.
The autopsy dragon has grinding teeth, and the grinding teeth are essential in the fire physiology because the dragon chews on this mineral, platinum, and it's a catalyst for fire.
So it's quite a neat solution, I think, to a number of really quite tricky technical problems, which I may say evolution hasn't managed to solve in 500 million years, so it's quite satisfying to have achieved something that the natural world hasn't.
Solving an evolutionary mystery meant dragons were scientifically plausible, but to be believable, the dragons would have to be physically plausible as well. So Animal Planet turned to John Sibbick.
He's the guy who started to really imagine the dragons, not just from a behavioral standpoint, not from an inner working standpoint, but just what would they look like?
A world-renowned illustrator, Sibbick has been creating dinosaurs for books, researchers, and museums for a quarter of a century. And the challenge of creating a realistic dragon was too much to resist.
The difference between drawing dinosaurs and dragons is that you had a lot of artistic license. You could create in your mind how you wanted it to look. This is the classic Chinese dragon. It's got sort of sensitive feelers in the front, it's got forked tongue, it's got the sort of bearded fringe, and it's got spikes, and it's got this great thrashing tail. This one I see as the classic dragon. It's got massive wings, it's got the long head, and it's got the spiky bits, and it's got fire. This one, on the other hand, has 2 sets of limbs. There are no front legs. They're incorporated into the leading edge of the wings. So this one makes more anatomical sense. It's a large theropod dinosaur, like a T-Rex.
To take dragons from science and sketches to the screen, Animal Planet turned to the leading animation company in the world. Framestore's Emmy-winning work on Walking with Dinosaurs and their collaboration on the latest Harry Potter movie made them the ideal partner to bring the dragons to life. For dragons to look real, they have to feel real, and that's where the folks at Framestore start.
Hi, my name's Darren Hawley. I'm texture painting supervisor on dragons. It's my job to design and paint the skins of all the creatures in the show. We wanted to go for a quite dramatic look, but still keep within the realms of believability. So these guys have got a kind of like a black and white ochre type of colour. The references we use for this kind of thing are real-world animals. Anything with a nice textural quality to the skin is good visual reference. So we'll paint the creature from lots of different views. So we'll do a side view, top view, bottom view, front view, back view, and then we project these all onto the surface of the model. And once they're projected, we take the skin off and we unwrap it and take it back into 2D space. So basically here you have the skin unwrapped, and you'll have the head here, the spine running down here, the tail. These are the back legs. So this is a finished product with all of the maps in place, lit and rendered. So once all these elements are combined, hopefully you will believe that you are seeing real dragons.
Textures make the dragons feel real. But to become real, they have to move like real animals. And that's where the animators come in.
My name's Neil Glasby. I'm lead animator on the Dragons project. When we actually animate the shot, we start with a much simplified version of the creature than you actually see on the screen. The reason we do that is because it's a much quicker thing to work with. It would be prohibitively slow to work with what we call the final rendered model. I can show you the difference between the two here. And what we have here is you can see there's no textures on them. The models are much more simple. And again, this speeds up the entire process. But obviously that's not going to be good enough to show on a TV screen. They don't look like believable creatures. So that's when we then go to this stage, where all of the textures, the final detail, the lighting, and the whole creatures are comped into the scene. So it takes it from what would be, say, 50% done to the final stage. Rather than just the motion being correct, now the overall looks, the visuals of it are in there as well now, where you become a totally believable creature.
Now that the dragons have been established scientifically, artistically rendered, fully textured, and animated, they have to be placed in real environments, doing real things like mating.
My favorite scene in the film is the dragons when they're courting. The two mountain dragons towards the end of the film, we see them clasp talons and drop from the sky. They're literally taking the plunge together. They're going to mate, and this is a courtship ritual that they're doing. And we see this great free fall where they go down from 1,000 feet high, and they just plummet towards the earth.
A test of love, a show that they will bind together right until the very end, and only at the last moment do they pull away in a great barrage of fire.
It's emotional. I don't know why. It's just the beauty of the backdrop and just the idea. Wouldn't it be wonderful if you could have seen that for real?
The courtship follows the courtship behaviour of sea eagles. And so we gave the guys footage of sea eagles courting, and they do that whole clasping of talons in the air, and it's absolutely beautiful, and they fly as high as they can, they spiral down. The dragon courtship is very much following that, and the animators followed the rhythm of the clasping, and all that kind of stuff they took very much from nature. So they reference nature all the time when they're trying to animate these things.
How was this incredible scene created? Just ask the Dragons special effects team.
Hi, I'm Surya Quintavalli, visual effects supervisor on Dragons. For this shot, we required the two dragons to go down a sort of mating ritualistic dance and fall down a huge distance. What we did was filmed a number of different backplates, just panning up the mountain, so we saw the whole range. We then joined all these together in one long strip, so we had control of the movement. Put the creatures into the background, added mist and camera shake to make the whole shot much more vibrant, and there's the final thing. Sometimes the role of supervisor involves getting wet, so in this case, I put on a wetsuit in order to swim like the Chinese dragon or the aquatic dragon. So I'll cause my interaction and the splashes. The animators then time their animation to match up with that, give us a textured, rendered creature. And then we'll take that, blend in so we get the lighting to look correct, and to get all the splashes working properly. And then you got the final shot.
Creating mountains and controlling free-falling dragons are cool, but the most important element of any dragon story is hot, real hot.
I think whenever anyone thinks about dragons, it's always the fire bit that captures the imagination. So in order to do this, we shot a number of different flamethrowers, different fire elements out in location. Quite often this is the best way of doing things. It's the reflections you get on the ice cave and the way the ice melts, the water drips down is something you can't get otherwise. But we also supplemented that with a studio shoot of fire elements, of a flamethrower behind a black screen, which we could then extract and add to different shots. We shot this at slow motion and added a bit of magnesium dust just to give it a special magical sparkle to the whole shot. And then we're able to use these elements and mix them in with the backgrounds and the CG that we'd animated. I'll show you a few of the ways that we can get the animated creatures to look a bit more realistic and actually fit into the backgrounds. In this example, we're just having a bit of a dust kick. Then we can move that dust kick and just have it to be the dragon flapping its wings, kicking up a bit of sand on the volcanic crater. This is in the bamboo forest. We just want the Chinese dragon to be walking past through all the bamboo. But just to really sell the shot, we're going to knock the branch on the way through. So we'll film the branch being knocked. And then as the dragon walks past, just kicking it, it just gives that believability to the whole thing and blends the two elements together. You've only got one chance to shoot things, so when you get back, there's no point in thinking, oh, I wish I'd done this or that. So you've got to make sure you're very thorough. For lighting information, we tend to use a white ball. This gives us the direction of the sun, the shadow areas, and also these poles give us a sense of distance and perspective. These are all fixed heights. And this number there is the distance where I'm standing from the camera. So in this case, 6.4 meters. Sometimes holding a lighting ball in one place isn't quite good enough because the lighting changes a lot throughout the cave. So there we've got our lighting ball in position, but we can see there's very different light in different areas. So a walkthrough will show us how this changes. When the dragon then has to walk through the same place, we can see what's going on and how the light falls off. Some other effects are slightly more subtle. In this case, we've got a rock which has just been delivered as a gift by the male dragon. And we can see this steaming at the top of it that's coming off. So we want to try and replicate that with our animation. So we'll get the lighting right, and then get a bit of rippling going. And as a final touch, just put the nostrils flaring slightly as well. And then you got the final shot.